Hi, everyone. Today I'm excited to have Navin Persaud, who serves as Vice President of Revenue Operations at 1Password, where he leads the design and optimization of the go-to-market strategy across multiple products and segments. He's got over 20 years of experience spanning companies like IBM, Vision Critical, and now 1Password, where he has built and scaled revenue operations from the ground up. Welcome to the show, Navin.
Thanks, Reed. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'm really excited about getting to know more about your journey, but how did you get into this world of revenue operations?
Pretty simple in that I was in sales
Okay.
and I wasn't good at sales or didn't like sales. But what I loved was the opportunity to support the process, the systems around selling. Very numbers driven, and there's a science to selling, right? Great sellers are emotional creatures, but the people who support sales are less emotional and more analytical minded. And I think naturally I skewed to that.
Very interesting. And you're running revenue operations at 1Password, which has gone from serving individual users to landing massive enterprise customers. So given the sense of complexity, what does enterprise mean in your world, and how is it different from, selling into SMBs or mid-market?
From an SMB lens, you're probably dealing with one or two people in the sales process. You're
Okay.
probably dealing with a smaller install and a price tag that's, it's fair size, but maybe highly transactional. From an enterprise standpoint, there are multiple parts of the sales process. There is technical capabilities, integrations, rollout deployments. There's a lot more people involved, and more people means more complexity, more time. But if you're able to navigate it well, it can yield massive returns and drive big growth for companies. It takes a commitment from product, it takes a commitment from marketing, and then it takes execution from sales to make that happen.
Right, and you mentioned that you've been at 1Password for almost 5 years now, where now you're the vice president of revenue operations. But what was the state of things when you had first arrived? What was breaking or was about to break as the company moved up market?
This is a great question. I always use it as my preamble when I'm doing interviews with people looking to join the company, and I say, when I joined, there was one person in RevOps, and he was tasked with trying to implement a CRM and basically firefighting hundreds of questions a day from the sales org in general. We didn't have data, we didn't have process, we barely had a view on the customers in our business. But despite all of those things, the company was incredibly successful. And that was the reason why I joined, because I thought to myself, I can fix our data problem. I can fix our siloed systems problem. I can put in place process. I can't fix product that people don't like. 1Password has a great brand. People love the product. They love the simplicity of what it solves. It makes security easy. So I thought, wait, great, sticky product. They just need go-to-market support and sales. Joined the company and we're able to build what I call a foundation in the first year to basically elevate and put things in motion to grow a team, to then grow the business. As the business grew, the RevOps function grew alongside it.
Interesting. And I want to talk more about enterprise pricing complexity. At 1Password, you're not just doing simple per seat pricing, but you got volume tiers and multi-year discounts. So when it comes to pricing variables, how do you go about juggling those pricing variables across in a typical enterprise contract?
So we typically lay out pricing guidance in terms of here's how we price, and here are the pricing levers that you can deploy if certain things are true. And we enable the sellers and the sales leaders to sort of manage towards that. And I like to think from a RevOps perspective, we put the tools in the toolbox that the reps and the leaders can then leverage, whether that's performing a ramp deal, whether that is a multi-year with ramp, whether that is a POC that grows into a sale, the leveraging of one-time discounts. All of those things are tools in the kit, and every customer is different. Every customer's budget is different, or their perception of how they want to roll out the solution is different. So we allow those tools to basically conform to the best path to winning that business.
Got it. And what if you have 300 seats, but you're looking to upgrade into an enterprise account when you're looking to calculate prorated charges in credit accounts. So how do you go about, with that sort of system and processes, how do you make sure that you work together to make this happen?
So one of the foundational things we implemented fairly early when joining 1Password and implementing Salesforce was putting in CPQ. To me, that is like the lifeblood of a growing SaaS org, because the longer you wait to develop a system of sort of quoting, the harder it is to implement it based on the data that you have to migrate. We went through a lot of pain to rinse all of our subscriptions through the CPQ engine. But then once we did that, we got to a point where we could co-term deals, we could add products, we could maintain the inventory of SKUs that we want to sell, we can manage our renewals, we can understand our uplift scenarios. So all of those things are sort of programmatically built in our systems. Our reps just need to be enabled as they join to understand, like, here's what a prorated billing will look like in an amendment if you co-term the deal, here's what a renewal will look like. So we take the hard calculations away from the reps and make it easier for them to just understand what's the pain you're trying to solve and what's the best way to solve that pain through the pricing available.
Got it. And Navin, every enterprise customer wants something different, which is custom payment terms or very specific invoicing terms. So from a RevOps perspective, how do you go about balancing that flexibility for sales team who needs to close those deals versus maintaining those systems and processes that can actually scale?
I think this is where you have to have a very strong relationship with your finance teams, because it's their job and their KPIs to collect, and they're going to want to ensure that we balance the needs of the business with the needs of the customer. So I think it's important there to set, like, here's the baseline of what we would like, and as we sort of move towards what the customer would like, that there's equity in what we get in return, whether that be a commitment, whether that be the size of deal, whether that means using the customer as a reference or a logo. You find that balance and you negotiate from that. And the best sellers always understand, like, there's a give and take in those transactions, and to ensure that if they're giving in one area, they're getting in another.
You've led RevOps teams at multiple companies. So what enterprise billing actually costs in terms of time and resources, where there's the manual work actually high that nobody expects?
People think putting like a CPQ system in place is simple. It takes months, and there's a lot of planning. There's a lot of depending on what you're inheriting. I was lucky here. We were just implementing Salesforce, so I had almost a blank canvas by which to operate and work through and rinse our data through. But I've been at companies where there's years and years of custom billing that has been put in place, and then you want to implement a package solution. There's a lot of work, and the biggest advice that I've learned early on was stay on the yellow brick road, which means do not customize. Configure as much as possible, because down the road there'll be additional product developments depending on which vendor you use. And the more you customize, that means the more technical debt you're going to go have to manage in the future rather than use out-of-box functionality. So I learned that pretty early on. I've implemented CPQ 3 times, so I kind of learned each time on what not to do and sort of got better as we went along. But it was also very important to have a strong implementation partner along the way to sort of like keep you on that yellow brick road, to keep you onto best practice and to use as little as code as possible.
And you had mentioned that, the sales teams need to maintain great relationship with the finance team. But when you're looking to build custom pricing, do you also need to, loop in the product team and the tech team, because they would need to fix the custom-based billing for that enterprise as well?
Yeah, so it's very important. Like I don't set our pricing. Our pricing is set, and generally in orgs it's set through like your product marketing function, right? They set, here's our MSRPs, and then they provide guidance on what discounting and elasticity might look like. We then implement those things and provide guidance to the sellers. So there's an absolute like triangle of folks that are involved. There's the go-to-market org, which RevOps is a part of. There's your product marketing org, and then there's your finance org. And each of them will have their own interests, and you try to balance those out and then start with a system of rules that makes sense. And then you allow for approvals to then determine if you're going to deviate from those rules, who needs to weigh in to understand the value given and received.
Before the call, we talked about, especially how the sales teams focus on the emotional aspect of selling to the customer, but but especially but when it comes to RevOps, they're very analytical and they get to decide what would be the right sort of strategies. So if you can explain how do you go about adapting those sort of strategies in the age of AI and PLG motion, where you're working along with the sales teams to sell to the enterprise account.
The benefit I think I had, and I would encourage anyone getting into RevOps, is coming from a sales background and understanding how hard it is to sell and how easy you need to make it within the systems or the internal facing tools that a seller has to conduct business. So if you operate with that mindset, if you build with that mindset, you then have a realization that I'm not trying to build the perfect system. I'm trying to build the process with the least amount of friction that will get me to good enough, because perfect, as everyone will say, is the enemy of pace, and every business is driving for pace.
And especially when it comes to sales processes, any advice on how do you go about driving that sort of urgency and maintaining that sales process? I mean, you're trying to win big accounts.
As much as possible, define it, make it very clear, because for me, I own managing our company forecast. And for me, the sales process is super important. Pick a methodology, pick any of the ones that make sense, whether it's Sandler, whether it's MedPick, or whether it's spiced, any one of those, but pick one and be consistent. Then take that and put it in your systems so that your sales stages and your forecast categories align, so that everyone knows if a deal is sitting in this stage, they know what it means. It really is just an over communication, especially with people new that are entering the business, because sales can sometimes be a little bit of a revolving door. You want to enable to consistency. That way you can get the best predictable kinds of outcomes, because every company aspires to obviously beating their numbers, but they need to do it in a way that is like they can see it happening. Anything that's a surprise generally is never a good thing. If you miss and it's a surprise, or if you made it and passed the number and it's a surprise, there'll always be questions on why you didn't know sooner.
Got it. And you mentioned that you moved from sales to revenue operations. How do you go about hiring the best revenue operation people in your team? Any advice for people who would want to move from sales or partnerships into rev operations?
The one of the top traits I look for is curiosity. My day is a mixed bag and my team's day is a mixed bag every day. And if you only work on the things assigned to you and you never question the status quo, that's probably not a good trait for RevOps. With RevOps, you're always trying to make the engine, the machine better. And to do that, you have to understand why it works and why it works the way it does. You'll have, hundreds of people at any given moment trying to tell you, I need it this way. And you have to realize they're saying it because that's how it works for them. But you have to realize there's 400 to 500 people you need to service. So you're looking for what works for everyone. So curiosity is a big one. I would say you've got to have an understanding of how a SaaS business operates. You can't just understand the systems and not know, well, this is how inbound works and how outbound works and how CPQ works. You need to have a general understanding of the SaaS life cycle, and then you can sort of connect the dots. Well, we're going to need to understand our inflow of leads. We're going to need to understand what our coverage looks like. We're going to then need to understand what our results are skewing to. I think people with that kind of mindset and curiosity and just wanting to not, again, build perfect, but wanting to get better, very number-centric, those are all very positive traits I look for when adding to the team.
Got it. And in your view, what is the single most important skill to win in sales and to do a great job in revenue operations?
Wow, empathy. I would say that selling is hard, and there's a reason why I'm not doing it. I think empathy in understanding, hearing people, right? There's always friction, there's always data asks, there's always things broken that need to be fixed, there's always new tools, AI or otherwise, that need to be added. But being empathetic to listening, and then being a really clear communicator on here are the priorities. And there's always going to be trade-offs, because not everything can be done at once. And I think if you listen with an open heart and you communicate the same, I think you can build strong relationships, and I think that's the most valuable thing. Because if you aren't communicating and if you aren't listening, this distrust starts to surface, and a lot of go-to-market teams fail when there's a lack of trust.
And you've been part of multiple companies. You've seen companies try to build their own solutions versus buying purpose-built tools. What's your take on building those enterprise billing infrastructure in-house? Where do you see companies underestimate the complexity and the opportunity cost?
I am so against companies building their own tools to do things in spaces they don't operate. Like, for example, if you were an HR company selling HRMS solutions, why would you build a billing solution? Like, go build great software to solve HR problems. Don't go and build software to build billing solutions. Like, it makes no sense to me, because then you're going to need to dedicate a team and resources in perpetuity to both manage, maintain, and upgrade that solution. Whereas that same engineering resource could be applied to making your HR product better, which is where if you're a private company where your board is putting money into it, where they want to see the results, they care not about the inner workings of your billing. They care about the operating of your company. And I think this is where companies decide, oh no, it's best I'm just going to go build it. And then they don't realize that over time it becomes like a boat anchor on their business. And at some point, they will have to go buy best-of-breed software to solve for it, and then it becomes a complicated mess of migration, and it actually slows the business down. So while you're early enough and you're growing enough and you start to see you have product market fit, the growth is there, and you're starting to take off, go buy best-of-breed. Don't build it, because the future you will thank you for that decision.
And are there any warning signs that company has outgrown the billing or revenue architecture? Where would you advise founders or companies when homegrown systems won't scale? Is there any revenue number which makes you give that sort of advice?
It kind of depends on the business model, what's being sold, and the volume. A lot of companies start either at the top end, try to be enterprise winners, or start at the bottom end and win through land and expand through SMBs and then grow. Ultimately, it's less about the size of ARR, but maybe there's a cliff there. It's more about, are you doing manual things? Are you working in spreadsheets to determine billing and things of that nature? Are you hiring people whose job is to do things that you could otherwise automate through workflows and systems? Once you start doing that, then you start to then see, that's to me, the number one signal that the things that should be automated and in system are moving out of system and being held by people to manage it. To me, that's your break point, that's your weak point, because it'll limit your scale and your growth, because it'll then require you to invest more in an area that isn't going to return on business growth for you.
Got it. And in your experience, what are some of the common gaps you see where startups close the first big enterprise accounts, and what are they usually not prepared for before becomes sort of a crisis?
They're not prepared for onboarding and rolling out the solution. That would be thing one. It's great to win the deal, but the work really starts after you've won the customer, right? You've got to get them adopted, you've got to get them onboarded, you've got to get them to time to value. So I think that's the big piece that lands with your onboarding or your CS teams. You then have to understand feedback along that journey, right? What are they telling you? Are there things that you need to go invest in the product to ensure they're on the roadmap so that you can win more companies that look like this customer? And then the last one would be around, are you collecting revenue on time, right? Do you have the right system set up to ensure your billing flows are clean? Are you set up to integrate with, enterprise customers use Ariba and all kinds of other tools? Are you set up to bill them in the way that they need to receive those bills so that you can get paid on time? So there's a lot of things that happen below the water after you won the deal. And I think companies that are set up to manage for those things can actually then repeat that success.
What's the first thing you check in the morning? Is it Slack or email?
Oh, wow. Slack. I think we're a Slack-based company, not email heavy. I probably get more email through alerts that I've set up myself than I am getting from internal staff. But Slack is where it's at. I've got Slack on my phone. Sometimes I feel like I'm never not working, but it's because I'm a bit of a notification crazy person that I sort of feed off of it a little bit. But Slack is definitely where I start. I go into, all right, what's the business performance look like? Because then that will then inform me of where I need to go poke at in every day in terms of forecast or pipe coverage or key deals, etc. The understanding where we sit relative to what we said we do sort of guides my day.
Got it. And is there any product other than 1Password that you secretly admire, especially in the RevOps space?
Momentum would be a great one. So momentum.io. Love their platform. I'm a customer, also a reference. Think of it as a way to figure out how all of that unstructured data you collect in conversations can be used to tell your product teams what's happening and provide them with insight and feedback, understand what your customers are saying at scale, understanding how your sales teams are performing. Numbers are great, but what happens before the numbers is that conversation. And being able to curate it and distill it down into actionable data, that's really powerful. It's probably the first AI tool that we've adopted, and one of the ones that probably really early on, maybe 2 years ago now that we've been using them, for AI really took root in a number of solutions now since.
Got it. We'll put down the show notes. And do you have a belief which you early had when you joined 1Password that you have completely changed your mind about?
So you mean like a preconceived notion joining?
Yes.
Yeah. I think in coming to 1Password, I knew that they had a very strong brand, right? Coming from B2C, you could see it, like doing your research online. You can see people love 1Password, and it simplifies, and the side effect is great security, which is amazing. I had no idea the company was as successful as it was when I joined. Like, I struggle even now to look up companies and realize they're not already a customer. And I think that is the superpower of the company. Incredibly proud that it's Canadian based. Being a tried and true Canadian here, born and raised, I absolutely love working for a Canadian company and love seeing the success. I think we've had this lull for a bit of time where we didn't have very successful Canadian tech, and in the past 10 years that's changed, and 1Password is one of those reasons for that change.
Interesting. I just want to follow up. Are there any other Canadian companies that you follow, or you say that will go on to be the next Shopify? I think that's like the most popular Canadian company.
Is Cohere? I think Cohere might be a Canadian company. Yeah, they're probably one. I think today it's really around like, what are you doing with AI? I think companies like that, they're not going to scale in staff, they're going to scale in revenues and capabilities. So that's definitely a one to watch. But don't sleep on 1Password. I think as we thought of our business as protecting people, right? Whether they're at home or work. But in an age of AI, we've got to connect and protect agents as well as they sort of access credentials across systems to do their work. So pretty rapidly, our solution is benefiting heavily from the inception of these, artificial people running around and doing jobs that we also have to protect. So don't sleep on 1Password. We're absolutely on a mission here to make security simple, whether it's for people or for AI.
Got it. And Navin, what's the best way people can reach out to you and know more about 1Password?
I'm on LinkedIn. That's the only really social medium that I follow like a hawk. So I am there for sure. 1Password, definitely check out our website, 1Password.com. Have a look whether you're using us for your home or whether you're using us at work. We have a lot of companies that come to us because their contact to people say, I use you at home. I want to bring you into the workplace. That is one of the most common things that we see. Think about security in a world where companies are being breached, or whether you still have fluffy cat 123 as your password. Think about how to simplify your world. I don't know any of my passwords except one. That's the only one I need to remember, and everything else solves for that.
We'll put that in the show notes. Now, thank you so much for taking our time speaking to us. I really enjoyed my conversation with you.
Thanks, Rudy. Thanks for having me.